seen the interview with Keir Starmer. I think it was on Sky News, and Sky News talked to him about the recent elections, local elections in England. And Keir says, I get it. Now, credit to the interviewer. He eventually says, what is it that you get, essentially? And I have never seen, well, no, that's not strictly true. I have rarely seen a leader as out of touch as Keir appears to be. And he said something like, well, you know, I could say that typically the opposition in these types of elections do well, but I won't say that. I won't come out with a standard answer, whilst, of course, giving the standard answer. Come on, Keir. People aren't daft. They can see what you're doing. I'm not going to say what is a platitude, essentially, but in saying it, I'm actually saying it whilst pretending not to. And then we have the rollout of the stats and the figures in terms of the NHS. And the thing is, nobody's denying, nobody is saying that that is not a good place to focus, that that is not important. But it is possible, I believe, to, as a government, do more than one thing at a time and to have more than one focus. And I also believe that latterly, Keir was asked, because of the unpopular decisions that his government took pretty early on in terms of heating and pensioners and farmers, etc., would he change any of those things? And again, I'm probably paraphrasing, I am paraphrasing, but the answer seemed to be no, we'll just continue as we're doing. He's doubling down, saying we need to do things faster and we need to do more. Faster what? More what? What is it that you think you're actually doing? And yes, I do, again, recognise that there are things happening in the NHS and waiting lists coming down. Great, but he isn't, and I'm not the only person to use this phrase, but I actually used it getting on for a year ago now, 9 months or so, that he hasn't read the room. They haven't read the room. They didn't read the room before they got into power. Was it 14 years in opposition and essentially no real understanding? Or perhaps there is, that's the scary version, but no real understanding of what was driving people and how disenfranchised they were, how disgusted they were with the Tories, how jaded they were, and they wanted change. They had hope. And Keir has said, we were elected as party of change. And in some ways, of course, there has been change, but it's just gotten worse. That's been the change. More of the same. More of this sense of people not being listened to. It happened with the Tories, nobody's denying that, and people felt out of touch and that these people would do what they would do. But here's the thing, with the Tories, you kind of became inured to what was happening. You kind of expected it. It was like, okay, that's what they're going to do, that's what's happening. Not all of them. Again, good people in the Tories, good people in Labour. That might be an unpopular opinion, but let's think of the individuals who are there rather than just simply collectivise them, which I know can be difficult at times. But the Tories did what the Tories did. The Tories Toried. And then the Party of Hope, well, it turns out the Party of Hope were really the party of dopes in many ways, because they just, again, 14 years in opposition, plenty of time to prepare, allegedly didn't prepare, apparently didn't prepare. That, of course, leads me back to the scary version. The scary version is they knew what they were doing and they had their agenda, they had their plan. And it's this sense of, I've used this allegory before. There's a party, people are having fun, but you're not invited. But probably you don't want to be invited to that type of party anyway, but you didn't realise exactly what constituted the very morality of these party goers, because it seems to me that we have a party, we have a leader who it isn't emotionally connected. And because he seems to be not emotionally connected, other people aren't connected with him. And we have this chasm, we have this divide, in many ways worse than it was with the Tories, because as I've said, the Tories will Tory, some of them at least. Labour, not Labour in any shape, way or form as I would recognise it, and I know I'm not alone in that. So Keir appears to be doubling down, saying, I get it. You could translate that as, I get it and we'll improve. We will take this on board. We will recognise the fears, the frustrations, the real concerns that people have, not only about their lives and the state of their lives and what they are fearful of, but also the concerns about the leadership in the country. But he doesn't seem to mean that when he says, I get it. He seems to mean, yeah, I get it. I get what the noise is. And that's fair enough, but we're doing what we're going to do. And I come back to, some of that is fine, but without the ability to address the hopes, the aspirations, the ambitions, the fears, the worries, the concerns of a lot of people in the nation, then you're not getting it. And if you are getting it, and if you're ignoring it, then again, that emotional detachment is a disaster for all of us. And one can only hope that within the Labour Party, people are recognising what's going on. No, you may have done exercises like this where you sit and look at things from your perspective, and then you sit and look at things from the perspective of other people. And then as a third view, you literally step back and look at both sides. You take like a third person view. And if anybody in the Labour Party could look at the populace and the leadership and rationally, calmly consider where the tensions are, where the fears are, where the hopes are, and just jot down, just have a little scoreboard, how many of them are actually being addressed. Oh, and give them a weighting as well. And if you do that, and if you think about it that way round, then I believe that you will agree with me that people are just not connecting with this leader, with this government because of that, and indeed are being repelled, are being disgusted, are being, well, fed lines that they don't want to hear anymore. They don't believe them. And remember, again, with the Tories, people were already jaded. There was a lack of trust, a lack of engagement with the politicians and the politics, certainly in the UK. And what's happened since then? Do people seem more engaged or less engaged? I think they're less engaged in terms of hopeful and more engaged in terms of irritated, annoyed, distrustful. And that word trust, I've talked about that as well before. When trust is removed, when trust is broken, which I think it was done early on with this government, then it is very difficult, extremely difficult, some might say impossible to get it back. But I think at least the government should be making moves to gain that trust. So instead, we'll work faster and harder and do more of the same, Keir. No. For goodness sake, man. Take a step back. Listen to people in your party. There must be some. So if you think that people are going to just, okay, well, we'll cross our arms and have an ice cream and wait until all these deliverables are delivered and then be happy, it doesn't work like that. People have talked about this lack of a story that you seem to have. The party seems to have. What is it you represent? Nigel Farage said, I think it was after those local elections, he said, and again I'm paraphrasing, that one of the issues with Keir is nobody actually understands what he represents. And I think that's absolutely the case. It was the case when he was in opposition, and many people said, I'm not sure about this guy, he makes me feel uneasy because I just don't quite get where he's coming from or what he really stands for. So he was in the shadows, he was chameleon-like, he was changeable, things they seemed to be expedient in terms of, yeah, I believe in this, I believe in that. But we did hold out some hope, or some people did. There were a few embers there. Again, the waspy women, let's pose for photographs with them. Oh, come to the crunch. No. But again, we've got the black hole that was indeed in part caused by decisions that Labour made. And Keir himself says, yes, I made political decisions. I've said before, one of the issues that I have with him is not only is it very difficult to understand what he represents, what he actually believes in, but that, again, the scary version of that, it could be that what he believes in is him. The Starmerism is him. It's where can he take himself to gain more power, to gain more influence, to gain more authority. Because if that egotistical trait or traits that he appears to have are actually there in reality, then once more, I call out to people in influence in that party, and indeed within, how would I describe this, within the higher echelons of society, those people who talk to people who talk to people, to say, hey, look at this guy, what is he doing? The country's becoming demoralized in many ways. People have had enough. And Keir and people like him will say, well, that's populism. And I come back to saying, it isn't populism. It isn't populism at all. It's demagoguery. That's what Keir mixes up with populism. Populism is not wrong in of itself. If you say to people, I'm listening and I'm going to do something about it, and you strive to do it, how's that a bad thing? How is that a bad thing? And Keir would say, oh, well, maybe it's right, and maybe it's far right, and maybe it's extremism. I don't think the left and right and centre phrases and models work anymore. I think people are in a different space and place. They want to feel secure. They want to have hope. They want to feel part of something bigger, a community, a country that's moving forward. And in many ways, most people, whether they used to be left and right, would agree with that, but they're being told they're extreme this or extreme that. Some people are, but I believe that they are in the minority. And so it isn't good enough to say, though that's right-wing thuggery. Not good enough at all. I think more and more people are actually in the centre, maybe even what would have been called centre-left, but these days it can be described as right, because people want to feel secure. They want to understand what is going on in the country. They want some of the money and the funding to be invested here and not go out into spurious other things. Some things, of course, have to be funded. Yes, absolutely, 100%. But what is happening? Where is the hope? Where is the vision? Where is the enlightenment that we're all hoping to get from this party, this People's Party, so-called? Instead, 14 years in power, no, nothing, didn't learn. It seems to me as if there was a plan, which was partly make it up as we go along, and partly, well, they'll just have to do what we say because we're in power. But you're in power because people, again, I come back to using that word, we're so disenfranchised with the Tories. But the fact you didn't get that, once more, for me, there's a bifurcate here that we have to consider. Either you just aren't smart enough to understand, to have read the room, to have picked up on the emotional state of the country, to say people really need to be treated differently here. We need to be transparent, we need to be honest, we need to be impeccably ethical, we need to do all that stuff. That would be a smart thing. It didn't take much, actually. It didn't take that much intellect to pick that up. But either you didn't pick that up, which means you're not that smart, or you did pick it up and you don't care. You don't give a damn. What is it then? What is it? What is going on? And I think maybe the good news is that this drubbing is likely to continue. But I've said before, and I'll say it again, I don't think we can continue like this as a country. And of course, we are in a democracy, and that is very important, and we need to follow procedures. So a procedure surely could be from within Labour to find someone to lead who is ethical, who is moral, who is able to connect emotionally with the population. You can't please all of the people all of the time, absolutely. But my goodness, Keir, you do seem to have a knack of apparently upsetting all of the people a lot of the time. I use that word once more, disenfranchising a lot of the people a lot of the time. And it's getting to be almost all the people all the time. Anyway, for the moment, from me, adios, bye for now. I hope you found it interesting. Not sure if there are any comments, couldn't see any. So if there are, pop it in the recording if it records, and I will attempt to comment on your comment or indeed answer any questions. So